ladies and gentlemen. I understand we're going to be speaking English tonight. Very warm welcome to this, for me, special evening with an author I love to read and an author I hope I can convince you, if you haven't read him already, to read and help him, I hope, to seduce you tonight to buy his books, think about what he's offering. Alessandro Baricco. Tonight we will be talking about barbarians. And to someone who lives in Rome, this is the country where in Roman times barbarians used to live. We are ultra limes here. And if you read what Caesar and Tacitus and others wrote about these parts, wild people living on small patches of land that were covered by the sea after a few hours, and how they survived, we don't know, and they're big and ferocious, etc. But Caesar exaggerated. He exaggerated because he needed that for political reasons. He exaggerated because he needed to get more funding from the Senate for his expeditions, but also because he needed to cover up his own failings by creating this image of these monstrous barbarians living in these areas. I think this is an interesting way to look at your book, of the way we have a tendency of portraying barbarians, not like they are, but the image we think we have of them. Is that how you see barbarians, or is it just jest?
Good evening, and thank you for coming. And I apologize for my English; it's not so bad, it's not so good. I will help myself with Italian and hands, and body language, but I will try. The first and original title of this book was The Mutation. I wrote this book for a newspaper in Italy, La Repubblica, and I wrote and they published every week or 2 times every week, and so when I spoke with my director of the newspaper and I told him that the title of this book should be Mutation, he didn't like so much mutation. And then he read the first 2 chapters and told me definitely the title is Barbarians. And this is pretty barbarian, make this title to this book. Because it's easier, it's more direct. Definitely he was right and I was wrong. Because mutation is a little intellectual. Barbarians, the problem is exactly this. The feeling that the people has to be invited from some mysterious barbarians who are destroying everything it's important for us. And the book comes from this feeling. When I wrote this book 4 years ago, in Italy, I could feel around me this kind of feeling, very strong, and everywhere, in intellectual elite, but also the people who doesn't like read book or study books. There was this feeling, okay, and there were many different reactions at this feeling, and often were reaction of fear, and so the instinct was to make walls between us and barbarians, but there was not the instinct to understand, just to make question, just to be quiet and try to understand. Because there was something of animal. It's like an animal that's look that something it's happened in his habitat and so on. And the book was exactly a way for me to try to think, to be quiet, don't be nervous, take fun, and try to understand, and not afraid. And the title is Barbarians, and so most of people was so happy that someone finally have written a book telling, oh my God, they are arriving barbarians, and so it's horrible, and we have to fight them. But actually, in the book, you can find the opposite, exactly the opposite. But was so big the instinct to fight against barbarians that after this book, I should go everywhere in Italy to explain that the book was not against barbarians, but against the idea that exists the barbarians. But just to understand that the instinct is so strong, okay? And so now it's everywhere in the world with this barbarian title.
What the essence of what you write about barbarians is that they are destructive because they want to be destructive, and from this destruction comes a new creation. Or to put it in more mundane terms, they don't behave according to the rules the existing powers that be expect, and thus the existing powers believe they are destructive, but from changing the rules they create something new. And one of the examples you use in your book, which will appeal to some of the audience, although some of the audience wasn't born yet then, is the way the Dutch national team played football in 1974.
Yeah.
Perhaps this is a good example to elaborate on what you mean by this creative force.
It's a good example if you like soccer. For example, my mother, when she read these pages about soccer.
Okay, we'll do base afterwards, but we'll start with football.
It's a barbarian example, but it's good. Because I started to study some special experiences in which the people had this feeling of destroying barbarians. But simple words. For example, the way in which we eat the food or the wine, and also the soccer, and then the books. In every war, wine, food, soccer, there is this feeling that was so better before, and now this experience has not more soul, and we lost exactly what was there and was the most precious thing. Okay, we play soccer, we drink wine, we eat food. But it's not the same thing, and everything seems to be so poor, without soul, okay, sense, without sense, so cheap, so easy, apparently, so easy. For example, in the world of the soccer, in Italy, but I don't know here, but in Italy, there is this poetic idea that now the soccer is something that just money, spectacular, but there is no more poetry. It's no more humanity. Okay, and so we everybody are so nostalgic of the old soccer. Okay, and so I try to understand what is true in this feeling, but what is only lazy way to think. And for example, if I go back to 70, I was between 20 and 30. There was this aliens who played soccer, the Netherlands keeper. And the way to play was completely different. And if I studied the idea of movement they play, it's something that is very close to the idea of movement that have the barbarians. Just a little example. I played soccer in the 70s, and I was defender. Okay, and I had just one or two things to do. There is one man in the other team, and I have to destroy him.
The number 7 in your book,
especially the number 7, because I played in the left side of the field, and I never went in the right side of the field or in
front.
I can remember that when my team made the score, it was always so far from me. It was terra inesplorata. So we had just to do something, one thing, and we did it so well, specialized. Okay, and I knew everything of my opposite man. I can when I finished the game, I knew everything of him: the family, office, the smell, everything. Because I lived with him for 90 minutes. Okay, and this is the old soccer, primitive, for stupid. Now a player who play defender like me, 70, has to make at least 8, 9 different things. It's not only a defender, it's everywhere in the field. He has to understand the movement of the other, not of the one man. Because he has to play with all the team. It's much more intelligent. But this is the new soccer that we had. I don't know exactly why. And the first time for us, the time in which we discovered this kind of crazy way to play soccer was with the Orange and Cruyff and everything. And I love a little video that I found in YouTube. There is this game, Netherlands against Uruguay in '74. And if you want to understand what are barbarians today, we have just to check in this video. With the orange shirt, you can make experience of a new civilization. And in white shirt, you can exactly recognize our old civilization. And what I like, there are two things that I like in this video. The first is the face of the Uruguayan players that don't understand anything and live situation that never before, in 4, 5, 6 in offside, and they look at each other and never experienced it before, and for all the game they don't understand anything. And I think that all the time, they spend all the time to make 1, 2, 3, 4, because the doubt was that the orange was 22, because it was impossible. And the other thing, like it's typical barbarian, is that the orange plays, make a new civilization, make a show, fantastic show, and I think they make 1 or 2 goals. And 2 because they don't care. It's not important in that fight. They don't care. They play. So it's and there is one little sequence in which there is Cruyff, the name, okay, the king, he goes to a battere fallo laterale.
To throw in the ball.
Sì. That's crazy. Because if you are the king of the soccer, you don't do it. There is some stupid of your team that you receive the ball. But in this, everybody makes everything, and I can recognize perfectly the way of life of my son, 11. Everybody makes everything. So it's reasonable that cry to make this stupid thing.
If I understand you correctly, you identify three things in the barbarian's behavior. First is disregard the rules. Second is have fun. And third is don't be afraid to fail. As long as your rate of success is slightly higher than your fail rate, it's okay. Is that something you could, in general terms, apply to how so-called barbarians behave? Is that also the way creative energy is released, for instance, in new societies or relation?
Yes, in the system in which I grew up, and most of us, to be motionless in one point, concentrate, passionate, have time, reflection, and go in deep in this point was exactly the beginning of the knowledge, of the thinking, okay? And for the barbarian civilization, it's exactly the opposite. If you are motionless in a point, you are dead. And understand means move. So, move quickly, not slowly. Move slowly, you are stupid. But move quickly. This is the way to catch the world. Move quickly, that in the soccer was move quickly the ball and move quickly everybody and make different a different design.
We called it total football. Total.
Yeah. There is no one little corner of the field that is dead. Because if I am here with the ball, here there is someone who moves. In the old soccer, you can call at home. No problem. But you can't really stop to play. Okay? It's exactly what my son, 11, does every day. They never stop. They make movement, always. And usually we hate this, because the instinct is to say, stay there, take time, go in deep. But it doesn't make sense for barbarians, because the sense of the experience grow up in the movement. In one special movement, that is the movement, not slow movement, but something really. The performance of the mind for the barbarian is how quickly he can move. So this, I think, is one of the principal points, and you can recognize this in the most of the experience, in the model of the experience of the barbarians today.
Something I was thinking of now, listening to this perpetual movement, or the need for movement, from Il Gattopardo, which is also about a period where everything is about to change completely. Tancredi at some point says, when he's challenged that he chooses for the new Italy, he says, because the Count doesn't want things to change, want things to remain the same. His answer is, for things to remain the same, everything has to change. Is that also part of this barbarian knowledge that deep down they want change because they want to hold on to certain things? Or is it just complete and utter creative change?
No, I'm afraid that the first instinct of the barbarians are barbarians. I want to be clear. There is no one intelligent side and one stupid side. There is not a civilized side here, for example, and outside the barbarians is not like that. The barbarian, we are barbarians. It's a mutation, and everybody here is a little bit barbarian, a little bit old civilization. Okay. I think that the first instinct is to build new rules. Second is to keep something by the past. That's the second. If you can't do it, okay. It's not so important. If you can do it, okay. The barbarians are a kind of melancholy for the past. They are not. They don't hate the past, the old civilization at all. They don't care. Just a little time to build a big cathedral for them, not ours. And this is our problem every morning. When you in the morning, what you exactly you are making is to building a new cathedral. It's not we don't keep on this moment, but we don't know always that it's like that. But I think that it's like that. But everybody here.
But it's interesting that you would use the image of a cathedral, because one of the most intriguing concepts you use in your book, and which has really puzzled me, is to say that these barbarians have no soul. They have lost the concept of soul, whereas our behavior was very strongly determined by the knowledge that there was a soul. It sort of defined our behavior in a sense. And you say that they are almost like Achilles in Homer, who in the Iliad, who also did not have a concept of the soul, because his only idea of immortality was to die a hero on the battlefield. And I was wondering, is this a deeply pessimistic view, or is it just sort of a distance view? Do you deplore the fact that there is no soul, or do you just have this idea we need to deal with the fact that there is no soul? And what does it mean not to have a soul?
In English, it's difficult. This is the soul is the name that we use to fix the heart of the experience. Okay, the point in which, in every experience, you can find the more high, noble aspect of this experience. But it's a name. And it's a name that was born in a period, just at the beginning of the Romanticism. It's not something that is with us from ever. Yeah. It's a name that comes from the Romantic culture. Of course, we have this feeling that there is something of precious inside, and we need to save this. And it's useful to use the word soul. When the barbarians comes in some way, okay, the first thing that we can understand that the soul disappears. And this experience seems to be more light, more insignificant. There is no more in the deep of this experience some truth or something like that. So we are afraid for that. If I deplore or not, I am pretty sure that actually the way to think of the barbarians doesn't lose, yes, the soul experience, but so in another point. We can take the problem of the deep. Deep is a good word, and it's so clear. In the deep, you can find the truth of the experience. Okay, so imagine that you can't use this word. Forget it. Okay, but you have the feeling of the sense of the things, of the experience, and you want to keep the sense, but you have this point called deep. You can't love deeply. You can't think deeply. Okay, but you keep the sense. You have the sense. When you can put this sense, you will keep it. Just we say now today, just in the surface, the world. What was like a stone in the deep, you can, like a sand, put on the surface of the world and keep it in this form. And I think that this is exactly what the barbarians do.
This is sort of what Levinas describes as the fly that can sit on the water and doesn't sink in the water. He just skates the water and touches it lightly without ever understanding what is the meaning of it all. I think, is that what you mean when you talk about superficial, about staying at the surface, not diving in?
Yeah, like something like that. I know that the superficial is a bad word. You are superficial, okay? But it's the genius of the barbarians is that they made of this word a good word. To be in surface, it's good, it's difficult, it's a performance. You think about internet, okay? The word that Americans choose for the movement on the net is surfing. And in this world, you can understand everything. There is no something of important to go deep, but it's important to surf. If you're able to do it quickly, taking fun, okay, you are in this, you can. When you go in the internet, you move in this way, surfing. There is the deep in the internet. It's not important. It's much more important the movement and the surface. You can travel around the world, all the knowledge, what you want. But if you use in a good way this instrument, you have to surf. In Italian, it's navigare. It's like a ship. Always I don't know in Netherlands.
Surf. We are totally infested by English.
So you can imagine the character. Take fun, moving very surface of the world. And we use every day this.
We should do what you do very often in your book. Look at the audience and say, you've been a very good audience to go all that deep with us, and now we should turn to a perhaps lighter note and talk about the style of your book. Because what I enjoyed so much about this is this eternal, incredible feeling of wanting to seduce your readers. Not by making things superficial, but by creating an atmosphere of fun. It's fun to do this. And you're sometimes in your style, you're almost like a Greek chorus in an old tragedy. You take the reader out of the book and you tell them, this is what we've done now. Now we're moving on to something else. Please follow me, and at the end I will tell you what we've done. Is it because you write for a newspaper that you use the style, or is this because you understand the need to also stay at the surface, to follow your reasoning?
Yes, because Barbarians is a pretty barbarian book, and it's written in a barbarian way. starting from wine and the style. That's right. It's like someone who speak, not write, and the words are more light, more, and tells a story. It's not convince someone of one idea. It's telling to you a story, and this is me. And I'm looking forward to understand why my son is this way, why in the school the students are changed in 5 years, why when I meet the audience of my books, I meet aliens and they read my book, and many why, okay? Taking fun, because thinking is take fun. It's so funny. It's so funny trying to understand. It's not something of... It's tiring in a good way, but it's basically, it's like make surf. It's fantastic. And so I didn't decide to write it in this way, but there was the only way to do it for me. And the newspaper was the right place. I could write a book, just a book, but it was so old. It seemed to me so old to make a book. And I remember that I could imagine that the readers of the newspaper, and then a page about barbarians. And this for 3 months, 3-4 months, one time every week, 1-2 times. And sure, they don't read everything, just something. And then the next week jump and then go back. And this perception, I like this perception. Because it was barbarians, just, and inside the other news, the sport, theater, politics, jump, and science, economy, barbarians. That's good. That's the only way in which I could tell the story. And I think it's the only way in which my son could read the story.
So, we're now talking about newspapers, and we were talking earlier over dinner about, we were comparing Italy and the Netherlands and the situation in the society, in politics, etc. You work for a newspaper which is at all-out war with the Prime Minister of Italy and the press that supports him. A very courageous position by your newspaper and its owners, because it was on a vicious attack by the Prime Minister with all his economic power, which is perhaps even greater than his political power, to try and those people who make it possible for the paper to be published, advertisers, not to advertise even in the paper. So you were part, even if you perhaps didn't want to be, of a real political struggle in Italy. In your view, was this perceived by the population as something you standing up for the freedom of the press, or were you just seen as partisan in this bipartisan struggle for power?
The question is about the fighting about the freedom of the press. There is a problem in Italy. It's obviously because the Prime Minister is owner of so many media. And so we have this problem. We choose to have this problem because we choose the Prime Minister. So, and I think it's a right fighting, good fighting, and everybody we did it. In Italy, you can't really find a solution for one specific problem. It's a part of a bigger problem. And the bigger problem is a country chose to be led, governed by a richest man in the country. Stop.
Why?
Very
Why?
That's difficult.
But for a Dutch audience, it's interesting. I think people here very often wonder, why do Italians stick to this clownesque, if I may be so offensive, figure of Berlusconi, why does he appeal to the population so that he can hang on to power for so long? What is the reason?
There are so many reasons. One of the reasons is that everybody else was not convincing.
So the first reason is the rest is too weak.
Yes, too weak, and that happens. That happens.
I know.
Another reason is more general, that the politic in the barbarian age turned a little bit in a fighting of storytelling. It's not a proposal of solution for problems. It's a telling story. Let me tell you a story about our country. The last example is Obama. The policy of Obama is always storytelling. If you check most of the speech of Obama, it begins with a story. Yesterday I met a lady who was, and we can and everything. It's a story about the United States, and it's a story very short. We were bad. We are sick and tired to be bad, and we can be better. Stop.
I think it's a classical sermon, Christian sermon, isn't it?
It's perfect for American audience. For Italian audience, so actually the left, when Berlusconi comes, had no story, had maybe solution for problems, but not story at all, and anybody could telling story to the people. No one, okay? And this man had a story. When first I heard the story, I can remember very well, on television, I thought exactly, such a horrible story. And that means that I am in a little intellectual elite that has no more, that is no more in touch with the real world. Because this story was not so bad. It's not a story like the story of Obama, of course. It was a little different, and I can tell the story in this way. Okay, the politician world is horrible. Okay, trust me, I'm rich, I am able to make money, I'm able to make solutions to the problems, and we will do it together without the politician and taking fun. This is a good story. For a country like Italy, it's a very good story. And so, since now we choose our politician only for this reason, a good story, the most of Italians choose this story. But I know that basically the world think that we are a stupid country because we choose a man like that, like this. But I don't like him at all. But I think that in some way it's very Italian. And this is the Italian intelligence. In some way it has been some way since we are a little more smart than others, this is the idea that we arrive before than others in one point in which every country will arrive. And now here, but also Sarkozy, if you want. But the conclusion are not so different.
But there is one difference if you compare Italy with other places like the Netherlands or also France. I have to admit that I've had the privilege to work with Berlusconi, and he's certainly not stupid. He's a very, very astute politician, and he knows exactly what he's doing. You know, with all his talk about not being a politician, he certainly is a politician. But you were talking about his humor, and it is a very coarse sense of humor, and it gets him into trouble all the time. But it is a sense of humor, and Sarkozy has no sense of humor whatsoever.
Because he's French.
His more or like equivalent in the Netherlands has no sense of humor whatsoever. But what they do, and which at some point, this is now happening in France, turns against them, they use resentment much more. I don't see Berlusconi, Bossi uses resentment, but Berlusconi doesn't use, Berlusconi makes jokes, but he doesn't use resentment. And Sarkozy has used resentment, and it now begins to turn against him. Why is resentment not such a... wrong question. Is resentment also a strong political force in Italy, as it is, for instance, in this country today?
The resentment is very good. It's another story. The story that in Italy is the story of the Lega, that is
in the north.
Yes. In the north, yes. This is another story, completely. And the genius of Berlusconi as politician is that he is able to keep together two completely different stories and work together. This is the talent of the politician. But in the story, the Berlusconi stories, there is no space for resentment, for sadness. Nothing. Because he is, personally, he is the absence of every sadness. I understand that when they make the big meeting of all of the prime minister of Europe, and he goes, and then he make this typical Italian. This is exactly what we do in the pictures at the school. Okay, everybody has done this. Okay, he goes there, and it's horrible. I know it's horrible. But Italians need to have some.
There is no malice. There is no malice. It is silly, but there is no malice. It is not an evil action. Is it?
He says always this stupid sentence. This is, we are the side of the love, and the left is the side of the hate and it's imagination. but he seems this.
But you were talking earlier about the power of stories and the seduction in stories for politicians. If I can briefly talk about this country, one of the most telling sentences after the Dutch general election in June was in a place in the province of Brabant called Rukven. And this is a rather small town where Mr. Wilders had the highest score at the elections. So a lady was interviewed in that place, and they asked her, why did you vote for him? And she said, I know that everything he says is not true, but he's absolutely right. But no, don't laugh about this, because I think this is essential. It's essential to understand that for her, the facts don't really matter, but the story he tells of resentment, of fear of loss, of finding someone to blame is a story she can relate to, because it sort of gives words to what she feels rather than gives facts to reality. Is this something that enters into your idea of barbarians wanting stories rather than wanting facts to see reality? I'm looking for an answer to this.
But I think that this is an old situation. I think it was not so different in Napoleon age. The people trust of the best story. If you are not able to tell well a story, you are a loser. Maybe in some little piece of Europe, I mean 60, after the war, because the war was a story. The first and the second were the story, and the people trusted the stories, and then pain and horrible things. And so for I think 30 years, the people stopped to choose only stories and needed to have thinking and technical solution. And then, again, stories. But what I think, at least, for example, that the left, also the left in Italy, could have a story, but they are not able to tell the story.
Well, you know that the British historian who just died, Tony Judd, he said that the problem of the left was not that it didn't practice what it preached, but it didn't preach what it practiced. So when he said the measures might be good, but the story is absent. And even if you have perfect measures, if there is no story or if there is no transcendent value, then the measures will have no meaning to your constituency. That is Tony Judd's idea. Could you see happening? I see it happening in the Dutch left. It's also something you see happening in the Italian.
I have to say that in Italy, we are speaking about politics.
Yes.
Okay. Why not?
No, we'll stop. I promised I would talk about politics briefly because you said you wanted to talk about politics over dinner.
No, I think that in Italy there is a problem with the left because not always the left has a solution to the problems. I have to be sincerely. There is also this problem. And then there is a problem with the story and the storyteller. Okay, we don't have. But if you think about the real problems of the people, I'm not sure that on the left we have all the solution that they need. So we have just to study and understand and to be open, not afraid, but we need time. In this time, Berlusconi, take fun.
Back to your book, because once again, I hope we can convince tonight's audience to buy it, because it's such a wonderful read. I enjoyed it from first until last page. One of the most telling stories you tell is the story of wine, because you describe the transformation of. Let me put it differently. There is a parallel development in the drinking and producing of wine, the emancipation of society. The fact that people who before had no idea of wine culture could afford to buy wine, not only make them part of the wine, change this culture fundamentally. And is this also, in your view, a metaphor for wider change in society? But perhaps first you would like to tell the story of this development in wine, because it's such a wonderful story.
Yeah, it's complicated. It's a long story. In which it's difficult. But basically the situation is the typical situation. There is a little war, very sophisticated, very cultivated, with a high culture. And there was in the 50s, 60s, the war of the wine, French Italy. Over there, the people made wine and drank wine. And then there was the war in which the people drank other things. Okay? Sometime a glass of wine. And this community was perfect. And so wise, so sophisticated, an art. There was an aristocracy, the big French producer of wine, sitting on their hill in Bourgogne or Bordeaux, and in Italy, in some area, the same. Okay. What happened that a big mass of people, barbarians, enter its world. And in this world, because the soldiers in the Second War, the American soldiers in the Second War, had tasted in France and Italy the wine. So when they go back to the United States, she wanted again this. There is no wine here. Okay. In Italy, we eat chewing gum after the war, and then wine. And so someone began to think to make wine in the United States. For who? For the taste of the United States, not for the French, for Italy. And here we have other technological reason, but finally, I cut it short. They made it. They made a wine that was for people that drank or beer or whiskey. So it needed to be something that was funny like a beer and strong like a whiskey. And this is exactly the wine they made. That is pretty different from the European wine. More easy, you can drink, and you have in this moment all you have to taste is there. Okay, no passions, no time, not complicated. Okay, very easy. Strong, rich, not something. And funny, the names, not so complicated. Which year? This is Barolo, the 96, 97, nothing, just a name. Because all the years are the same. Okay. When the European, Italian, French heard this kind of thing, they told one word: barbarians. In 20 years, these barbarians have put the wine around the world, everywhere, because it was easier. And they sell this wine in an easy way.
It almost sounds like the Heineken marketing strategy. A beer that doesn't taste like anything else, so that it sells all over.
Yes, it's a fight. Okay. Now, in Italy, in France, we see this. The aristocracy is completely changed. And in Italy, and in use also typical American wine with the same characteristic. Okay. And with the name French, and with this wine, they sell the wine in Japan. Never before. Never. In the big hotel in Malaysia, or in South America, or in Australia. The Australians make wine. It's a model. And in Italy, they look at this model, they make this model a little better, and sell in Australia. So you can. Finally, when I wrote the book, I went to visit one of the most famous and one of the king of the wine in Italy. Is the bigger, the most famous producer of Mesco. Is a fantastic wine in the world. His name is Gaia, and they spent one day just to talk about this. And he explained all this process. Now he is incredibly more rich than 20 years ago. And just for this reason that I explained to you. And so finally I told him, so you are happy for the barbarian invasion? And he told me, silent, and then told me, yes, I think that this new world is a good world, but now come with me. And we go in the cave, take out for wine, and I drink this wine. Fantastic. It's like read Cartesio. It's fantastic. Something of really different from everything. And so you can see the two civilizations together. Keep something special that comes from the past and leave what's new around you. And you will be in your world. It's no problem. You can do it. We can.
But this is a very optimistic view, because in your book, sometimes you tend to be rather pessimistic. At least I, as a reader, thought that perhaps here you were tending to pessimism. But every time at the end of your story, you bounce back and you end on optimistic note, because you see that the creativity prevails over the destruction side of barbarism. So in that sense, being barbarians at the end of the day is a good thing in your analysis. The only problem is, and this is something I meant to ask you, and then after this question, I'd gladly bring in the audience if there are questions. The only thing I was wondering is what it does with old farts like ourselves, if I can say, old people. Because, you know, let me just give you one very specific example. In his memoirs, Winston Churchill describes the biggest change in his life, and it's not the Second World War, it's the First World War. Because he says when in 1914 a world died, he was brought up in the Victorian world, and he said in 1914, looking at it 50 years later, he says, everything I thought was fixed, was permanent, was unchangeable, changed. As something comparable happening in society. It's difficult to say when you're in the middle of it. You see such almost fundamental change in society, that this is more than ever a time for barbarians.
Yes, it's one kind of end, like it was for Europe after the First War. All in this moment they felt that they had not instrument for the reality, because all the experience was dead. All the rules were useless. We are lucky, because for us it's not so traumatic. The mutation is a liquid mutation, and so we have not the shock of something that's like an end of an empire. It's not like that. It's something that happens every day in a soft way. So I think that in reality there is no more old people in this world, because you have a Blackberry, the Barbari. Maybe you send important messages with important things in 7 words. You don't take care. It's good. It's not like a war that cut a civilization. It's different. So we are able to do it. It's not so difficult.
Let's see if I can bring someone in the other people in the audience who want to. I mean, I'm perfectly happy to go on and ask more questions, but if there's anybody who wants to join the debate and pose a question, please stand up and yes, sir. Go ahead.
My name is Wim Rust, and I want to ask you a thing about the way Italians behave, change. Well, there is said that Italians are very good lovers, but at the same time they don't produce many children. So the population of Italy is declining already, I think. And I once read that in 100 or 150 years there will only be some millions of Italians left. In the same time, there's a large immigration. And my question is Italy changing the immigration people to Italians, or are the Italians changed to barbarians right now?
You understand
my question?
Very well, but my trasmetto.
Just l'immigrazione ha cambiato l'Italia, ha cambiato questi immigrati, sono diventati italiani, eppure l'Italia si è adattata ai immigrati.
Ah, ok, ok.
How do you handle this
Yes.
problem? Yeah.
No, I could not say that the Italy changed in some way, adapting to the foreign people who comes in the last years. I could not say that. I think that in Italy the problem of immigration is a problem. It's not so dramatic, I think. It's something that we are living. In some moments it's hard, it's difficult, but we are managing. We are finding solution, and basically, I think that for our country has been a chance, a great chance, to be open. It's a balance that you have to take care every day if you want. But in this problem, I think that we have found in some way a way to live together and to take what is useful or beautiful to take. It's not bad. Not bad.
I used to learn to cook in 2 restaurants in Rome, and when I go back there now in the kitchen to talk to people, there's no more Italian women or men cooking in the kitchen, but men mainly from Bangladesh and Sri Lanka who cook perfect Italian dishes. But
yes, this is everywhere. Because I go to New York, there is an Italian that make burgers.
Yes. I saw a gentleman back there who had a question. Yes, sir.
Actually, here I'm from the museum world. I like your book very much, but what I missed in it, a few about museums. Museums as institutions, very slow. Are the mutants already in the museums? Are the barbarians? What is your opinion about that?
Barbarians and museum, this is the question. And you work in a museum.
I work in a museum magazine. I give you an example. When you go to Florence, it's hardly possible to go into a museum there because there are people all over. A lot of museums like that idea that you know about visitors, but in Florence it's totally impossible if you decide I want to go to a museum. They are all culture tourists. Is this something we must like or hate? Is this something we want to come to us?
So 1 million people experiencing a collective stand-out syndrome at the Uffizi in Florence.
One of the characteristics of barbarian civilization that we can recognize is this, the list. So you want to have experience of the baseball, okay. You need to know which are the top 10 players of baseball, and you watch TV play baseball by these players, and this is the experience of the baseball. There is a one final big match, 1,000 million people there, okay. And for the museum is a little like that. Which is the top 10 list of the Italian painter? Okay, Firenze, Uffizi. Go there, take care, wonderful. But in the little museum about the art in one area of the world, of the Italy in 400, no one, just a few people. Because the barbarians move in this way, the top 10 of everything.
But what I find intriguing is that we seem to have created reservations. Reservations for musea, reservations for sport, reservations for literature, reservations for politics, etc. And the barbarian skates from one to the other. But the meaning of culture, the meaning of musea, the meaning of literature is only in the connection with other areas of your life and world. It's not one of our problems that we miss connections where there should be essential connections.
But the connection is a specialization of the barbarians. They connect very well. It's no problem. The problem is to make on the table something of good. Right? The problem is to be able to eat everything. The talent of the barbarians is perfect. When I was young, I had a TV in my house and there was one channel. At a certain point came a second channel. And in the first channel, when started the broadcast in the second channel, there was a signal. So you have to go there. You know, horrible, no connection. You are not able to connect nothing. And now, no problem connection. A child of 7 years connect without problem. Cartoons, sports, dramatic scenes of CNN, war. The connection in mind works very well. And the culture is the same. Why the barbarian doesn't go in the little museum in which he can see a fantastic painting of a little fantastic artist? Because he's making something else. He's in a cinema, a stadium to see baseball, music. And the connection between Uffizi and the music in the iPod and Discovery Channel and the teacher at school and cartoons and video games and this connection is the culture. So he has not to go there. And this asks for you, sorry, I have not so much time, so please tell me the top 10 so I can. But it's not stupid because he used the time in a different way. The typical example is the classical music. If you want to know classical music, you have to spend one life. If really you want to know classical music. And then, what do you know exactly? When you spend all your life studying classical music and heard. The last barbarian comes that just heard a little piece of classical music, but know very well cinema music, not classical, popular, and theater, and can connect everything. It's better than you. Makes sense more. So, what seems a problem is not so big a problem.
Let's take another question from the audience.
Yes, hello. My name is Paul Spies. I'm also from a museum, I'm afraid, but I have a question that's outside the museum, John. There's one extreme thing you say in your book. I'm a great fan of it, I must say. Many people here in this room has been coming because I demanded them to come. There's one extreme thing which you're saying, and that is that the barbarians are also a bit afraid of the deep. Because, and you're not very specific about it, but you say it, they blame the deep for a lot of war that has happened after Romantism. Like, for instance, the First and Second World War. I want to be very sure about this, that you really think this is happening to the barbarians, because I'm telling people that you think that barbarians are blaming the deep for that sort of destruction. Do you believe really that barbarians are thinking that the deep is...
Thinking is not the word. Feeling, yes. Yes, I'm pretty sure. But me too, I'm afraid to values and principles too deep. Because the experience we made, often the old civilization that barbarians, the old civilization, you can recognize this old civilization in the 9th century,
19th century. 20th century, sorry.
20th century and the 19th century. So in the classical music, top level, in the literature, top level, philosophy, top level. Well, this kind of thinking, the real thing is that this kind of thinking have produced the most horrible century in the story of the man. I think, we think. It's not necessary remember that, for example, the elite, the artistic and intellectual elite that, for example, was just behind the phenomenon of Wagner, was deeply connected with an idea about the destiny of the Deutschland, the people that we knew very well. But it's not necessary. The fact is that in somewhere we feel that this way of thinking has produced something horrible. And I think that basically we are much more alive now. And this is one of the reasons, and it's dangerous to tell this here, but one of the reasons for example, it's difficult for us Western people sometimes understand the Islamic world, and one of the reasons is exactly this, that it seems to be so deeply, to have a reason that go too deeply for us. We have almost nothing that is so deeply not in our. So you can see the difference, because in the Western world we are really, after the experience of the wars, we are something that is too much. But we trust something of more liquid, more relative.
But what I find problematic in this reasoning is that, going back to Adorno, you write about Adorno as well. Adorno said, in a world without God, or where God is dead or gone, the only way to prevent Auschwitz from reoccurring is to relive the memory constantly and to have that as a part of your collective understanding. And this goes to the deep. If you avoid the deep and you forget about Auschwitz, if you follow Adorno's reasoning, you might help it reoccur. So in that sense, there is a need for some form of collective memory in his reasoning. Do you agree with that? Because it seems to be at odds with what you're saying about the avoidance of that memory because it is so painful.
Well, Adorno was right. The mistake, where it's wrong, is if you say the only way to stop another Auschwitz is to keep the memory. Yes, it's a way. It's not. We can see that it's not the only way.
Okay.
Another good way is, for example, don't believe in nothing that is radical, so deep that you can destroy people. This is another way. So if we cross the two ways, for example, it's good. And the reason for what we keep memory. But the memory alone, it's not enough. Not enough at all. You can just maybe produce hating for these people, and you can just continue.
Because it's sterile if there is not no creation accompanying it.
No, you have to change one good way to stop another argument is to change the landscape.
Okay, yes.
And choose landscape in which this is not possible.
Right. I think we'll take, I saw a finger back there, just one more question before we round up. Yes, please.
I was wondering about the role of religion because of the secularization nowadays. And a lot of people don't believe in the afterlife anymore. Like poor people are afraid to waste money. Rich people are afraid to waste time. For example, the wine, about the wine. Why should one invest 3 years in developing a taste in wine, or enjoy the wine, the cheap Hollywood wine, in these 3 years? You understand what I mean?
That's a tough one. In essence, because her starting point was world religion. What she's saying is, if the concept of God is not so important in the reasoning, which is linked to a sense of eternity, why should you take time for things? For instance, do difficult things because they take time, whereas you can use the same time to enjoy easy things. Is that a correct?
Yes.
But I don't understand the connection with God.
Well, let's leave God out. But just this interesting concept of saying, why would you want to do all these difficult to learn to appreciate this very difficult wine, whereas you could use all that time just drinking and enjoying easy wine? Is that?
When we compare to the Dutch society of maybe 100 years ago, people believe in the afterlife, then things will be better. Nowadays, you have to use all your time because
I understand. You don't want to wait until you're dead to enjoy yourself.
Yes.
Yes, right, okay.
Non ho capito se lei è favorevole a questa cosa.
No, lei vuole sapere se questa idea che non c'è una vita dopo la morte ci ispira di vivere bene adesso.
Okay, yes, maybe, but the point is not that it's easier or fun or more funny. Let me give you an example. Children. The phenomenon is the multitasking. Okay. They do many things together. They watch TV, chatting on the computer, writing SMS on the telephone, playing video game, making things with fingers, and speaking with the mother, and with a ball, playing with a ball. Okay, they make all this, and the parents obviously say, please make one thing, and we say, make one thing well. Okay, take care. I think that the truth is that they are not doing many things in a bad way. They are making one thing, one very well. And the one thing is watch TV, speaking with this grandfather, telephone, chatting. And this is not easy. It's not easier than watch TV concentrated. It's more difficult. For me, it's more difficult. But they are able to do it. So often the barbarians make things that are more difficult. When I was a child, I was stupid. If I think about my son, I was so stupid. I play with little cars. I think that my son can play with a little car for 1 minute. If there is a watch TV and the computer chatting, okay. That's so stupid just to take. So it's easier. Take a little machine. It's easier. So it's not always that then they choose the easier way. It's not always like that.
But they don't choose.
Oh, they choose. When I was a child, I could not choose. When you have one channel, you can choose. You can choose just to turn off, turn on. But when I enter home and I see my son, he is watching TV, a Discovery Channel, History Channel, or a cartoon. He can choose in hundreds of possibilities. He has 4, 7, 10 years. He's educated to choose. Okay, they choose a lot. In internet they choose.
I'm going to choose now to slowly come to the end of this evening. I want to thank the audience for your patience. But above all, Alessandro Baricco, I want to thank you for your insights, for your wonderful style, which I thoroughly enjoyed, and for your twisted but very insightful way at looking at the world, which helps us understand where we are and where we're going. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you.